everyone, this is Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to hand paint a pre-knit blank with a rainbow of Kool-Aid colors. Now, some of you in my last video with a blank asked what a knit blank is. It is a long pre-knit tube that you can use to dye your yarn with longer repeats of color. If this were just wound into a skein and we dyed a section this long, the repeat wouldn't be very long. But if we dye a section on the pre-knit blank this long, you can end up with a self-striping yarn. Commercially, you'll find these called sock blanks, which will be machine knit with 1 or 2 strands of fingering weight yarn. So that way you can dye a pattern that you will then knit onto socks. And these blanks are totally unravelable, so that way you can knit from them in the end, and it's just really a tool for dyeing. But this one I'm using today is not a commercial blank. It is one I created myself using this Singer hand crank knitting machine. So you can make these blanks of whatever yarn you want and stuff at home if you have some kind of crank knitting machine. Because it's not really worth taking the time to hand knit the blank yourself. That would be pretty labor intensive. So we are going to start off by pre-soaking our blank in water for about 30 minutes or until the fibers are saturated. Today we are going to use 6 colors of Kool-Aid: cherry, orange, lemonade, lemon lime, ice blue, raspberry lemonade, and grape. But I want to point out that since these are intended for drinks and not for dyeing, they contain different amounts of dye. The cherry the cherry flavor contains a lot of red food coloring and is probably going to create a much brighter color than, say, the ice blue raspberry lemonade, which contains a much smaller amount of blue. And if you look online, you can see recipes for how many packets of what color you would need to be equivalent to other colors. But what they do have in common is they all have the same amount of citric acid, and that is what we need for the food coloring colors to stick to the yarn, is for there to be an acid source. So you can feel free to supplement any of these colors with liquid food coloring, so that way you can get more intense colors without needing to use more citric acid. And personally, I really enjoy using Kool-Aid because it smells so good. In each of these 6 cups, I have 1/3 of a cup of plain water. And I am going to start adding each of the different Kool-Aids and stirring them up. I have a waste cup off to the side to wash my fork in between different colors. Now I'm working on a granite countertop, which will not absorb any color and will be easy to clean off. But, if you're working on a surface that may stain, you want to make sure to protect it with a tablecloth. And you may also notice that I'm wearing gloves. This is just so I don't dye my fingers. So the mixes don't need to be perfect. And you can change the volume of water that you have with the dyes. The more concentrated you mix the colors, so like the smallest volume of water possible, the brighter your colors will be. Alternatively, you could try adding, 2 packets of Kool-Aid to 1/3 a cup of water. It's really up to you to experiment and see what you like the best. But I know from my personal experience that about a volume of 2 cups of dye is a nice volume to have when hand painting yarn. This is my first time working with the lemon lime lemon lime Kool-Aid. This green, I actually had to buy it on eBay. It is not an easy color to find. You will, if you look in your supermarket, you'll see a lot more red and orange colors than the couple blue and green colors that exist. So the ice blue raspberry lemonade is a pretty, it's much more similar to neon McCormick's food coloring than blue. But I'm excited with how deep this green is. I was expecting it to be more of a yellowy green, but we'll see how it looks when we actually dye with it. And then finally the Grape, which is a more, a pretty reddish purple. So we won't have like a true rainbow here, but it's certainly a rainbow of Kool-Aid. There we have it, our 6 colors of Kool-Aid. So this fingering weight blank is fairly long, and I've laid it out as such so that way I have 6 places for the 6 colors. If you want, rather than having like a really long stretches of stripes, if you want to have more repeatable stripes, you could lay the blank in a circle and then, or just repeat sections of color around. But I decided to do this to have a red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple section to my yarn. So there's many different ways you could apply the dye. But today, I'm just going to go straight for some pouring action. And then I did not squeeze all 100% of the water out of the yarn to help with some spreadability. But you can see that I am bringing the yarn around in the section and blotting up color. And I'm going to leave some of these connecting edges for the end to potentially mix some of these colors a bit more. And I'm also saving a little bit of extra dye just in case I need some more. Color that I want to add someplace. Oh, this smells so good. And I like to have paper towels on hand for wiping the excess color off my hands in between sections. Now some people will go crazy with their blanks and will add like shapes, and you can use syringes like we've done in other tutorials, or many other types of methods to add all different fun shapes and stripes and diagonal stripes. And then you can see you know, what effects you will end up with, and that can be really cool too. So just know that you aren't limited by these long sections of color. But as I said before, you know, if, you know, instead of doing each of these long sections as a color, I were to do half or a third, I could repeat the colors a lot more and then end up with smaller stripes. Then I'm going to end up dyeing the yarn this way. I also want to add that in the way that I'm dyeing this, these color repeats aren't necessarily going to be even. And you know, that's just because since I made this blank myself, it is so long that the blank itself is so long that, you know, it's hard to fit on the surface in any kind of regular way that still gives me space to separate the different colors. Whereas, you know, when I hand paint, if I were to hand paint, say, like a worsted or a bulky length of yarn, I would have more, there would be less yardage, so the actual blank would not be as big. But this is really a problem from a handmade blank like the one that I am using today. Now, in my other most recent KoolAid dyeing tutorial, where I looked at dyeing or breaking grape dye on a skein, I used 3 packets of grape for an entire 100-gram skein of yarn. And so, you know, that just goes to show that you really, you know, 6 packets of KoolAid is plenty for, you know, 100 grams, which I'm dyeing right here. But, you know, you can use less and still end up with some great coloration. Now, the red. And, you know, within a section, since, you know, we want these colors to be fairly even, you can roll it up a bit. And when squishing, you're really just trying to eliminate sections of white color. Now we're coming to these more changing sections. And so I'm going to take, you know, say my purple, and a bit more up there because I've got a fair amount left. Add some purple across there. But then in this section right here, I'm also going to add some blue. Oops, and oh no, I'm still on the saran wrap. And you know, so this section of transition is not going to be super long. But you can see that by pouring some on top of each other and slowly working some of this up, I am getting a bit of a color transition. And if you don't have a lot of any of the color left, don't despair. There should be enough volume in, you know, your dyes that you can squeeze up from your section before to get some nice overlap. You know, or you can even put one on top of the other a bit to bring some more color down. Oh, this is pretty looking. So looking at this a little more closely, it looks to me like the lemonade is the, oops, having paper towels handy in case you spill is also a really good idea. Alright, but as I was saying, it looks to me like the lemonade color is the least vibrant of all of these shades. And, you know, it doesn't matter if it's not perfect in the transition. I guess you can't really see this very well, but the green kind of goes up the middle and isn't totally even across the row. The transitions aren't going to be perfect and might be a little more mottled depending on the way like you do your striping, but that's totally fine and will still look really, really awesome. So now to prepare to roll this up to heat, I want to condense some of these sections a bit more. So it's really off towards the edges of my saran wrap here. As you can see. But now before I fold the edges over, we want to try to avoid having mixes of colors in between these sections, but it can happen and you just have to deal with it. So I'm kind of pressing down the saran wrap a bit in between each of these sections, not so much as like any kind of seal per se, because it's not going to keep liquids from passing, but just to do the best that we can. So I'm rolling this without doing very much squeezing because I don't want to pass color between different sections. And now gently picking this up and passing it onto our microwave safe plate. I'm going to cover the plate with more saran wrap because we don't want the we don't want anything to dry out as we're doing this. You can see we already have some liquid leaking out. So now I'm going to pop this whole thing in the microwave and microwave on high for 3 minutes or until this feels very hot. After 3 minutes, this is warm, not quite as hot as I would like, so I'm going to add 1 more minute on high and then let this sit and cool completely. I want to point out that there's some liquid that is leaked out of the grape section. So, you know, we could end up with some other additional little striping going on this, but we won't know until we unwrap it. After cooling for 2 hours, we are finally ready to unwrap. And as I'm unwrapping, I'm placing I'm unwrapping the skein. You see there's little bits of purple that have leaked through, a little bit of green that leaked through there. See, some of that purple did run. Oh, I'm out of the camera. So as I'm unwrapping, I'm going directly into some lukewarm water to start rinsing. Alright, so you see that we've got all these really nice bright colors, and very little color is leaking out into the wash cap. And this means that we have successfully let the color adhere to yarn. So I'm going to use some dish soap to wash this further, and then after washing, as long as the water continues to run clear, we will hang this up to dry. While this Kool-Aid dyed blank is drying, I wanted to point out that there are a few imperfections where colors bled from one section to the other, but I'm still really happy with it, and especially because these sections will, when I'm knitting something with this yarn, they will get spread out more over the entire product, because what I'm going to be knitting isn't going to be as narrow as these blanks are themselves. But I'm very happy with the intensity of colors that we've achieved. This pre-knit blank is now completely dry, and I just wanted to give you a peek of what it looked like before I started unraveling it and winding it into a center pull ball. I'm now slowly unraveling this pre-knit blank and winding it into a center pull ball. As I've said before, you can choose to just knit directly from the blank, but I thought that making the center pull ball would be really pretty. And so now we're starting to see the transition from red to orange. And when I'm not filming, I go a bit faster. But yeah, so we keep unraveling until we get all the way done. Here we have our rainbow Kool-Aid gradient wound into a center pull ball. This asymmetric gradient was created from 6 flavors of Kool-Aid that we dyed on a pre-knit blank. You can make your own blank by purchasing a crank knitting machine, or you can find some of them commercially available at different sites, such as Knit Picks. I hope you enjoyed this dyeing tutorial. This is Rebecca from ChemKnits.